Hi, my name is Lauren Gurney, and today I'm going to be doing my OCE on ocean acidification. Alright, to start off, what are some environmental changes you are aware of? One big one I can think of is ocean acidification, but is not well known. One quote I thought fit this topic was, "The way to get started is to quit talking and begin," stated by Walt Disney. Although Walt is probably talking about Disneyland here, I still feel that these words exemplify the fact we need to take action about ocean acidification. This is my thesis statement of my research on ocean acidification. Since the Industrial Revolution, the ocean has been decreasing in pH due to human pollution. This chemical change within the ocean mainly impacts small marine organisms with calcium carbonate shells. Although these organisms may be small, they play an important role in the marine ecosystem, as well as our own economy. Acidification is a very widespread problem, but with action from the government and the people, the water can be chemically reversed. So what is ocean acidification? When we produce pollution like carbon emissions and nitrogen and sulfur depositions, we ultimately change the pH of the ocean. When hydrogens are added to the ocean from pollution, this causes the carbonate ion concentration of the water to decrease, which is necessary to keep the sea at equilibrium. Unfortunately, ocean acidification has already happened in history, specifically 55 million years ago, but this happened in a more natural term. Basically, an underwater volcano erupted and released 2,000 gigatons of carbon. To put that in perspective, that amount of carbon is equal to 14 million blue whales, which shifted the ocean's pH heavily. Like I said before, this was natural. It was caused by greenhouse gases, whereas today, this ocean acidification is all man-made. Starting from the Industrial Revolution, we have seen a drop in pH of 0.1, but it is important to remember 7 to 8 on the pH scale is a tenfold difference. The surface area of the ocean has already become 30% more acidic since the Industrial Revolution. Although the surface area of the ocean is just a small percent of the whole, the surface still contains diatoms and algae, which help produce oxygen. Now let's talk about the causes of ocean acidification. First off, we have carbon emissions. This kind of pollution is most prominent in the media, but also most prominently affecting the ocean. Carbon is released from everyday things such as cars all the way to factories. When carbon is released, it is emitted into the atmosphere, and the ocean acts as a sink to the carbon. So technically, this is great if we're just looking at climate change. The ocean is storing this carbon, so we have some more time to deal with the atmosphere. But in reality, this just creates even more problems. Currently, the ocean is only at 1/3 of its capacity for the storage of carbon, which is insane when you realize how massive the ocean is. Also, in the past 220 years, the ocean has absorbed 48% of the world's emitted carbon, which makes me wonder how much worse global warming would be without the ocean storage. So when carbon enters the ocean, it is deposited as carbonic acid, which releases hydrogens. These hydrogen ions will then bind with the carbonate already existing in the ocean. This will then lower the pH of the water because the carbonate is needed to keep the water at equilibrium. Another cause of ocean acidification is sulfur and nitrogen deposition. This comes from power plants and agriculture, where these chemicals are emitted from the air or by runoff. When in the ocean, these chemicals are changed to sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide, which will then change the pH. This happens more prominently on the coast. We even see this here on Long Island. As you may know, there's an exceptional amount of beach properties here, with owners looking to keep their lawns bright green and lush. This unfortunately requires an excessive amount of fertilizer, which ultimately runs off into the ocean. Luckily for the sea around here, there's a ban on fertilizer in the off-season. But I can't say that is the same for the rest of the coast. Now let's talk about the effects of ocean acidification. But before I start, what do you think ocean acidification affects? One place affected by ocean acidification is the coast. The coast is already a pretty stressed place if we're just looking at warming waters, deoxygenation, coastal erosion, and melting ice. So this just allows the coast to be even more susceptible to ocean acidification, mainly from runoff. This is important because this is where most fishing happens, so the marine organisms a part of our lives that we eat are affected by this. Ocean acidification heavily affects small-shelled organisms, such as bivalves. This includes creatures like scallops, clams, and oysters, to name a few. These organisms need shells in order to survive, but their shells are made out of calcium carbonate, which is what carbonic acid binds to. This not only causes the organism to have a lack of protection due to dissolved shells, but it also affects these organisms' larvae. Acidification can stunt growth, but also it can mess up RNA synthesis, which is a necessary process in cell survival. On the right side of the screen, you can see a diagram showing 4 different shells. On the left side of the diagram, there's healthy shells. Rather, on the right side of the diagram shows what happens to shells after ocean acidification. Here I have created a diagram that shows the different predators of the clam. This is a little simplified, but nonetheless, it just goes to show if the clam population decreases because of ocean acidification, how many other organisms will be affected. This even includes us humans. Not that we are going to die off if the clam population goes away. Rather, our economy could be affected, specifically businesses that catch these organisms. Some fisheries already have closed due to the downsize in populations of these organisms. Coral reefs are also affected by ocean acidification. Acidification basically prevents coral from recovering from coral bleaching by limiting the calcium carbonate needed to return back to health. It also leaves the coral liable to many things, such as the coral not being able to root, which then allows the coral to be harmed by erosion. Coral also has a mutualistic relationship with algae, which means they both benefit from living with each other. So when coral is affected by ocean acidification, the coral can no longer provide the algae shelter and nutrients. Then this makes the coral even more weak and vulnerable without the algae. This is important because coral reefs hold 25% of marine biodiversity, while only covering 1% of the ocean. These reefs are needed for many marine organisms, for food and shelter. But us humans also need coral reefs, as they give coastal protection, income, and food for several countries around the world. So I wanted to test around the island's coast for its pH. I went to 18 different spots on the island. I used a pool test kit which had a cell to test pH and chlorine levels. I did not see how chlorine would be valuable to this experiment, so that was not used. At these locations, I went into the sea less than waist deep and filled the cell with seawater. Then I returned to the beach to fill the cell with about 4 drops of phenyl red, a chemical used to change a liquid's colors based on its pH. I then matched the color that best fit each sample to find the pH. Let it be noted, I rinsed the cell in between each test. If I were to redo this experiment, I would have wanted to go out deeper into the waters. But overall, the average pH of the water surrounding the island was 8.1, which is right on target for what ocean water should be. It would also be interesting to see if the pH changes when fertilizer season begins again. This is a map of the island that I created to more specifically show my results. As you can see, the pH is pretty much normal. So what can we do to limit ocean acidification? One option to help combat ocean acidification is to put carbonate back into the sea. But this would require putting 2.2 billion tons of carbonate, not once, but every year. This clearly just is not economically smart, as it would cost a ridiculous amount just to do this once. A solution to ocean acidification is to just limit our carbon emissions, as it is the leading cause of ocean acidification. The government needs to put more restrictions on industries that are producing the most amount of carbon. One example of this would be a carbon emissions tax. Hawaii is the first state to try to put this tax into action. This tax would be placed on wholesale distributors of fossil fuels, but it could affect retailers and consumers. Then the money from the tax could go into things like environmental response and energy security. So it ultimately benefits the environment, and the money from the tax is used positively. But we also cannot just rely on the government. We have to be cautious of our own decisions and how it can impact the environment. The earth already gives so much for us, we might as well treat it the best way we can. Alright, now for the big question, why should you care? Well, to start off, ocean acidification is harming habitats on the coast and also coral reefs. But acidification is also harming small-shelled organisms. These things also harm us economically, specifically our fisheries. So we need to look out and heal the ocean, which is often overlooked, despite how much it provides for us. Now let's talk about my high school experience that has been unique to say the least. First off, we have financial literacy. Something in that class I found important was student loans, as it is something I am going to be dealing with throughout college. In order to apply for financial aid, you need to fill out the FAFSA, which usually opens up in early October every year. There are 2 kinds of student loans, government and private. Government is federal loans, which includes direct subsidized and direct unsubsidized, as well as Perkin loans. Meanwhile, private loans usually come from a bank, credit agency, or other organizations. For government loans, you have to apply with FAFSA. There is a fixed interest rate on government loans, and it's about 4.45% for undergrads and 6% for graduates. Your credit score does not matter for government loans. These loans are sometimes subsidized, which means the government pays the interest of the loan while you're at school. There are income-driven repayment plans. Also, if you change your address, you have to contact your loan servicer, which is probably something I will have to do in college. Now for private loans. They have their own application process. The interest rates of these loans vary, but tend to be around 7.99%. Credit score does matter for these loans, but if your credit score is very good, you can apply for low interest. You can also qualify for a higher borrowing limit with private loans. Unfortunately, though, you might have to start paying off these loans in college. Overall, the application process was very simple for me, thanks to Miss Tuttle. Earlier this year, I toured 4 colleges that I was interested in, but I fell in love with the University of Maine. After I got back home, I applied immediately and got accepted into the University of Maine. I also got accepted into their honors college, but I still do not know how much of a workload change will be at the honors college, but nonetheless, I'm ready for a challenge. Also, before high school, I was pretty set on becoming a physical therapist due to how many injuries I had and how many physical therapists I had to see. But research changed that for me and really broadened my horizons when it came to science. This helped me to decide on a biology major. Research class will always be the thing that I am most grateful for that Shelter Island School gave me. In my first year of research, I worked with yeast, several types of insects, and computational science with proteins. I quickly figured out how much I hated insects, so I did computational biology for the next 3 years of research. In these 3 years, I worked with Brookhaven National Lab to crystallize methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase and find a structure on their synchrotron NSLS2. In the beginning of this year, we published the structure of MTHFR to the protein databank, and if you want to search it, it's 6PEY. Right now, we are still working to publish a paper on our research. I also have made a video of my research junior year, basically to try to show my family what I was doing, but in simpler terms, for my media production class. This video caught the attention of CCP4, a computer program we use, the Protein Databank, Brookhaven National Lab, and the Department of Energy. So, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, otherwise known as MTHFR due to its mouthful name, is an enzyme that is important in the folate pathway. But when this protein's gene is mutated in a certain spot in the human genome, it has been hypothesized that it causes things such as miscarriage or stroke, due to not being able to bind to certain ligands. So, like I said before, we crystallized the structure at BNL of MTHFR in E. coli and published. But I have also been using this program called AutoDocVina, which allows me to take the binding site of a protein, specifically MTHFR, and test different ligands in that site, like folic acid, FAD, cobalamin, and methylfolate. And this allows me to see what their binding affinities are to the protein, which just shows how strong each ligand can bind. There's only a few things I believe that need to be improved at school. First off, combined school sports need to be more prominent. If you just look at the lower grades, you can see the size of their classes are getting smaller and smaller. I know one grade has like 5 kids, so in the coming years, we're not going to have enough kids to fill a team. Sports are something you cannot just get rid of. I know I would have turned out to be a much different person if I didn't have sports. Not to mention my teammates over at Pearson were like my second family, and I've learned so much by playing over there. Another thing that needs to be improved is the art throughout the school. The fact is, our school is very bland, and I feel like there should be more murals. I know some schools have their senior students create art on ceiling tiles of their desired teacher's room, or wall tiles out in the hallway. Now I would like to talk about my gratitude towards the school. To start off, I'm going to talk about research just a little bit more than I already have been. The opportunity to be able to go over to Brookhaven National Lab and do research with some of their scientists and use a synchrotron that is used worldwide basically, it's just such a crazy experience. I would also like to thank Mr. Williams. He's always been there for me throughout my 4 years of high school, and honestly, he's such a great teacher. And he also helped me figure out like what my major should be, and or like lead me in the direction of what my major should be. Also the opportunity to play with Pearson High School for softball. Although my senior season was kind of ruined, I only had 1 week playing with them due to coronavirus. My junior year was it was the best softball season that I've ever had. They really welcomed me over there, and they just took me in, and I learned so much from them. And just thank you to all the people that got me over there playing for them. I don't know what to say. I really appreciate it. Also photography. I've been able to really expand my knowledge on photography, which is pretty cool. It's one of my hobbies. Especially this year, I got to take photos for varsity basketball, boys basketball, and JV girls basketball for the Reporter. And I also would like to thank the coaches at Shelter Island and Pearson for all my sports here at Shelter Island. They've all shaped me to be the person that I am. And to Coach Woody and Coach Trulin over at Pearson, they really helped me in softball and made me a better person. And also the National Parks trip was one of the best experiences of my life. Without that trip, I don't think I would have the respect for national parks that I have now, and I just have like a deep love for them. And that trip also helped my photography, so that was pretty cool. And here are some pictures throughout my years of being at Shelter Island School. Thank you for listening, and I hope all of you are doing well.